But speaking of January 6th, to begin your rally that way, and now here we are at a presidential campaign talking about hostages with the anthem. I mean, what would you even say about that, Melik, if anything?
Well, beyond the fact that I'm struggling to see because I got my eyes dilated today and nobody told me that bright lights would be an issue here.
Could be your lucky day.
You know, this is definitely not something that Donald Trump should be doing. But to explain why he's doing it, you got to keep in mind that a lot of people who support Donald Trump, definitely many people on the right, feel as if that January 6th, the rioters, some of whom have actually been treated unfairly. So Donald Trump is actually speaking to that. And if you remember, Donald Trump has actually been criticized. He was attacked from the right by people like DeSantis because they said that he didn't do enough or even pardon them before we even got much investigation going on. So Donald Trump is actually playing to that crowd, but there is an argument many people on the right have about how January 6 hostages should be treated. Donald Trump shouldn't be doing that aside.
Just to be clear, you wouldn't call them hostages, Melik, or...
Well, no, a hostage, there's a term. A hostage means that you are a hostage. Have some people been held without bail and some of those things?
But you're not comfortable with the term. You're just saying, you were just using it because he did. I know, I get it. I was just making sure we were kind of clear on that. Kaivan, I'm curious of how Democrats pick up on this. You know, because one of the things that's interesting about it, I think, just from a political strategic point of view, is after Mike Pence, right? So Mike Pence says it's unacceptable. He went on CBS, said this whole kind of thing's unacceptable, right? There's the headline. For him to use this kind of language, hostages. If you think about it, there's a lot of people that have worked either very close to Trump, like Pence, or worked in his cabinet and, worked around him that are now not endorsing him. And those are kind of the Nikki Haley type Republicans, or whatever you want to say. Are they coming over to the Democratic side, though? Have Democrats been able to capitalize on this? Or, to Melik's point, is Trump still being able to use the way he speaks to his political advantage? What do you think?
Well, I think that they are coming around and they're going to bring voters along with them. So first, it's speaking out and explaining why they're not supporting Donald Trump. And I would hope that after the 8 months of this campaign, we can convince them that we need their vote to save democracy. But I will say, you have people like Melik, who seemed like he was toying with the idea of possibly endorsing that hostage language. These Trump supporters will say anything, really. I think we've seen, what's the context here? The context in the English language is that he said that the bloodbath would be the least of it. So not just talking about the auto industry. The context in the bigger picture for anyone with a pulse over the last 9 years is that this is a guy who started his tenure in office by saying that the Nazis that killed Heather Heyer were very fine people, who then engaged in an insurrection, who then posted pictures of the Manhattan DA with a baseball bat next to him after felony charges there came down. Right. And we know it's not just rhetoric, because Judge Esther Salas's son was murdered by a Trump supporter who was listening to all of this nonsense.
You want to respond, Melik, just about that? It's Kaivan saying, I was going to move on, but I don't want to let, saying that you seem to be condoning the hostage thing. You want to respond to that real quick before we move on, Melik?
I mean, surely my fellow panelist here hasn't done a bit of Google search to figure out who I am. I've had no problem criticizing the Donald Trump campaign on many different issues. And so that has happened over and over again. I don't speak in talking points, which my colleague here is doing here. I don't speak in those talking points.
I just watched you for the last 20 seconds.
I criticize, and I criticize the Donald Trump campaign. I criticize Donald Trump himself. And I actually have documented evidence of this. Whether or not you can say that criticizing Biden or the Democratic Party, I don't know. But I don't just speak talking points when I come on a station, especially a place like NewsNation. I tell the truth, I'm objective about it, and I just don't pull out those things.
I think I'm going to move on. I think that's fair. Melik is on all the time, and he has been critical to his point of the Trump campaign on many occasions, while agreeing in other occasions. He's a Republican after all, with some policies. So I think that's fair. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.